Direct from Montreal, Canada, this is Rock Talk with Mitch LaFon. Rock Talk with Mitch LaFon.
Welcome to this episode of Rock Talk with Mitch LaFon here on Mitch Marathon Month, the holiday edition, actually. It's only 2 weeks. Yeah. But we have got from the band Down N Outz, singer Joe Elliott. They have a new album out called This Is How We Roll. And, all right, he's also the singer for Def Leppard, a band that is going out on tour this summer to play stadiums with the one, the only, the reunited Poison. No, Motley Crue. In fact, both, which is kind of cool. We love Poison, we love Motley Crue, and of course, Joan Jett will be joining them on the tour. And if you listen carefully during the interview, I think Joe suggested or said that we might have more stadium tours in 2021 with this lineup. So pay attention. You tell me if you heard the same thing that I heard, but I'm pretty sure we got a little sneak peek into next year. We also talk Mutt Lange. We talk first album On Through the Night, 40 years since its release, and so we discussed that. And on Instagram, Nikki Sixx had made a special demand. He sent out a message in his This Story where it said, "Hey, Joe Elliott, I want you to play Hello America during the stadium tour." So I asked Joe about that, and he gives us an answer. So without further ado, do you want to get rocked? Let's get rocked. Here's Joe Elliott. We are speaking with Def Leppard singer Joe Elliott. The new album by the band Down N Outz is called This Is How We Roll. The latest single is Creatures, and as we say in Montreal, bonjour, Monsieur Joe. How are you?
Bonsoir or bonjour, whatever time of day it is where you are. Great, actually, really good. Just being all domestic at the moment. I'm off the road for a little while, so it's all home, trees up, ready to rock for Christmas, and life is good.
Yeah, and I do want to talk to you a little bit about Montreal, because that's where I am right now. And, of course, Def Leppard has a great history with the province of Quebec and the city of Montreal. But let us focus on the album Down N Outz. This Is How We Roll. Talk to me a little bit about the concept of this band, because it sort of started off where you're doing some Mott the Hoople and you were doing some other stuff. And now we've moved into original music and saying, hey, you know what? We're not a cover band. We are a band that does original stuff. Talk to me about doing music outside of Def Leppard and also just doing original music with Down N Outz.
Well, the original idea of the whole band was only to be 45 minutes, one live performance. You know, when Mott the Hoople reformed for some shows in 2009, which 10 years ago now, it's incredible, I was asked by the band if I would be a special guest opening act on the last night of their London run. You know, I've been a fan of the band for so long, they really wanted me to be there for these shows, which I was going to be there anyway, but they wanted me involved. And I just kind of thought that they'd probably just want me to introduce them. But when Ian Hunter said, no, put a band together and open for us, I'm like, well, who? You know, I don't know anybody outside of Def Leppard. And he said, luckily, the choir boys, the London choir boys, are managed by the same guy that was promoting the Mott shows. So they volunteered to be my band. So, okay, so we put this band together and we were going to just play a 45-minute set of very cleverly chosen post-Mott the Hoople material that they'd all been involved in after Hoople split in 74. So there was the band, they carried on with a different singer, abbreviated the name of the band to Mott. And then they did 2 albums. They morphed into a band called British Lions. And all the time that this was happening, Ian Hunter was releasing solo material. So I chose some, what I thought were really cool songs from that period. And they went down a storm live in front of the Mott fans. And we kind of got press gang into making an album, so which was never going to happen. We were supposed to just say our goodbyes and go home. So we did the first album, My Regeneration, which had some really good success at American radio. You know, we had a number 5 with England Rocks and a number 1 with Overnight Angels, which is insane for a band that technically didn't really exist. So we always figured that after the success of that first album, that we would have to do something, do a second album. And we did the second album in 2014. And, when we just enjoy each other's company and we have fun doing this. So when it came to doing a third album, I kind of figured we'd the well was dry with doing Mott-related covers, and we were kind of over it, and so, well, why don't we try some other people's songs? And then after about 10 minutes, I said, why don't we just try writing some instead? And they were all like, yeah, cool. But it just turned out that I was kind of very fertile in the songwriting department for the next 5 years. So I ended up writing all the material, except for one cover. We did decide way back in the early days of this project to do White Punks on Dope, the Tube song. But other than that, I came to the table with a bunch of songs. I'd written 90% of them on a piano, so that I knew that there wouldn't be any conflict of interest with Def Leppard, So it just kind of made sense. I was writing on the piano in a very different way to anything I've ever contributed towards a Def Leppard project. So I was very comfortable that there was a reason to do this. And like I said, it wasn't going to conflict with anything I would be doing with the Leps. So, I was really happy the way it turned out. The guys loved it. They were on board with me just writing it all. And I love the way it turned out. I'm very, very happy with the album.
Well, as you should be. That first single, This Is How We Roll, is absolutely terrific. And it's very apropos that you covered White Punks on Dope, which is a song that Motley Crue covered back in the early 2000s. So hopefully on the tour you could come out and do it together. But talk to me a little bit about the songwriting process, in the sense that, with Def Leppard, there's a sound, there's an expectation. It's got to be sort of larger than life. It's got to be very much arena rock. And this is very sort of down and dirty. I mean, this is the sound that I love. I mean, this brings me back to sort of High and Dry. It brings me back to those early days. Is it refreshing for you to go back to a more stripped down, I don't want to say underproduced sound, but not all produced like a Def Leppard song is? Talk to me about making songs this way, just more rock and roll.
And it is a lot more basic than Def Leppard, but we need to understand one thing here: that Def Leppard we're not forced to write a certain way. We choose to write kind of, bombastic arena rock type stuff. That's what we do, and it's what we love doing. But at the same time, everybody in a band has an individuality to them that doesn't always come out unless they make solo records. So all you ever know about certain bands, like, say, for example, the Beatles and Led Zeppelin, you wouldn't have known their individual kind of influences until they split and started doing solo material. And then what you'll get is, when it's, say, Paul McCartney or John Lennon, you'll hear a little bit of overspill of Beatles sound, but then there'll be the individuality of it, because he doesn't have McCartney on the Lennon stuff, he doesn't have Lennon on the McCartney stuff. And same thing with say, Zeppelin. When Robert Plant went solo, he was no longer writing with Jimmy Page, so there was going to be a twist. And it's the same thing with this, really. The twist is that I'm writing the same way that I would write in my mind, but I'm writing on a piano instead of a guitar. When it came to lyrics, I was writing with a different headspace because it was a bit more introspective. So I'm scratching an itch for sure, but it's not one that I was so desperate to do that it would make me want to quit Def Leppard or something like that. This is just a side thing. It was, it's like stepping out of a long-running soap opera to act in an indie movie for a couple of times, and then go back. The process was no different, really. I'd sit and I would, labor over these songs until I was happy with them. They didn't get written in 3 minutes. They may appear that way, but they were as much love and attention spent on them as any Def Leppard contribution I've made. It just comes from a different angle, that's all. It's just a way, it's just like loaning yourself out to a different team. You're still playing the same game, really. So it was fun to do. And I think that the biggest difference was that I didn't have a soundboard. I wasn't bouncing ideas off somebody else. I wasn't being, I didn't have the weight of expectation, because there is no expectation with Down N Outz. So that, again, was a slightly different approach, I suppose. There's a freedom to that, for sure. And I didn't have to worry about what everybody else thought, because I was doing this for me. the guys in Down N Outz obviously care, and the guys in Def Leppard were probably just interested. But I was left to my own devices to create this record, but it was a team effort to record it, and it was recorded in the same studio Def Leppard have recorded for the last 25 years, with the same engineer that we've used for the last 20, so that there's a certain familiarity in the way it was recorded. But it was always going to sound different because it's completely different people.
Well, and it sounds great. So let me ask you this. Now that you ventured out into original music, do we see another new album come down the road, or is this sort of the point finale where you just went, okay, we did a couple of covers, and now we got to the original, we've said it all. How do you sort of see the band moving forward? More, or we got to where we needed to be?
No, I mean, it's an ongoing thing, but it's ongoing the same way that class reunions are, you know. It's not always the same every year, and not everybody turns up at the same time. We've got a situation where everybody in the Down N Outz has got a mothership that's insanely busy. You know, you've got Def Leppard, you've got three of the guys who are in the Choir Boys, you've got Cher in Vixen, and Phil Martini, the drummer, in Wayward Sons. When I call them up and say, are you free? The chances of all five of the other people saying, yes, we're free for X amount of time is extremely thin. The chances, you know, it's highly unlikely. That's why this record took the best part of 5 years to complete. It only took about 3 or 4 months to record, but I had to do it in 2 or 3 days at a time and grab them, sometimes two of them. You know, we recorded the drums in London, we recorded the bass in Florida, we recorded all the rhythm guitars, backing vocals and solos and lead vocals in my studio, but not all at once. So it was done very much like the way the Stones did Exile on Main Street. It was an album that started off in 3 or 4, you know, different studios and was mixed in one. And, you know, it was a joy to do because I'd read all the history and the stories of, like, Exile on Main Street, for example, being recorded the way it was. And it's often regarded as the Rolling Stones' best album. So the fact that it was piecemeal didn't really bother me at all. I had the vision of the songs, and that's all that really mattered to me, you know. So how we achieved the final output, if you like, was really irrelevant. It was a case of just get on with it until it's done. We will make more music given the opportunity, but it's not. We're not signed to a label. We don't have an A&R man saying, you know, tapping his watch face saying, you got to do this, you got to do that. We'll make a record in maybe another 5 years before I get a chance to make another one. But I'm constantly writing all the time for Def Leppard, for anybody that wants to hear a song that might not fit the format of Def Leppard. And in that case, I have this great other outlet for those type of songs.
Yeah, great. Now, we're down to about 10 minutes, so let me ask you just a couple of Def Leppard questions. Nikki Sixx recently threw up on his Instagram a demand that Def Leppard play Hello America on the stadium tour, and of course, that is from the first album that is going to be celebrating 40 years in 2020. First of all, will you acquiesce his demand to play Hello America? And talk to me a little bit about that 40th anniversary and the upcoming box set or that's related to the early demos and stuff.
Well, that's the kind of thing I'd expect from Nikki. I suppose I'm going to have to do the same thing and throw something in the air, you know, equally as testing as that particular request was. I doubt very much we'll be playing something from the first album because, you know, Vivian and Phil weren't on it. We've occasionally played Rock Brigade just because we may have been browbeaten by a certain front row somewhere. And when we played it, it's only been 3 people that recognize the song. So, you know, there's just certain parts of your career it's okay to jettison. And the first album for us pretty much is at this point in our career. We've no problem in existing and no problem celebrating its 40th anniversary by talking about it and doing an early days re-release. I think the cool thing about the re-release is not the fact that the album's just been remastered, because essentially it's just the same record, but it may sound a little brighter and a little, you know, more pristine than the original vinyl did 40 years ago. But it's the bonus material of the live performance of most of that album from Oxford New Theatre in 1980. We'd forgotten about the tapes, to be quite honest, and when we dug them out and preserved them by baking them as you have to, and then transferred them into Pro Tools, we were very surprised at how good it was. So we were more than happy to put it out. And with hindsight, really glad that we made the decision to record it. Why we never put it out before, I don't know. But I guess back in those days, the mantra was you make the record, you tour, and then you make another record. Whereas this day and age, it's not really like that anymore. And so pulling out the old material, we're kind of just doing what the Beatles have been doing, or the Stones, or the Who. You know, you're moving into a different aspect of your career where the hindsight part of it is very interesting to long-term fans. So that's something to celebrate for sure. As for what we're going to play live, we haven't made that decision yet, but I think Nikki may be a little disappointed on that one.
That's too bad. Just real quick, because we are running out of time, I do want to bring you over to High and Dry, which to me is still my favorite Def Leppard album. I just love everything about it. It, of course, is where you start working with Mutt Lange, and we all know what happened there, Pyromania, Hysteria. But talk to me about how did that collaboration come to be? I mean, here he is coming off of Back in Black, coming off of Foreigner 4. He did some stuff with Clover, which ended up being Huey Lewis. How does sort of a rookie band out of the new wave of British heavy metal get Mutt Lange to sit down and make High and Dry with them?
Well, don't forget as well, before AC/DC, Mutt Lange had some UK success, at least, with bands like City Boy, Boomtown Rats.
The Boomtown Rats,
yeah. A band called The Motors. He did their first album. So it only really just moved into what you'd call massive success. But it was more a case of right place, right time. You know, Mutt Lange was AC/DC's producer when they were out on the High and Dry. On the make your faux pas there, on the Highway to Hell tour, and we got the support slot on the Highway to Hell tour because we ended up with the same management as AC/DC. They were signed to Lieber Krebs in New York, and Lieber Krebs heard our first EP and loved it and wanted us, and they signed us. And by the time we got onto the Highway to Hell tour, where we were kind of on trial to see how good we were, because, you know, you get to play 10 songs rather than just the 3 that they'd heard from the studio. We were kind of on board, and Mutt would come and see AC/DC, and Peter Mensch, who was our representative at Lieber Krebs, begged Mutt to come and watch the band. He was already in the building, so he said, will you come and watch my new signings? And Mutt saw us, and in his words, way after the fact, he said, that night, which was at the Bingley Hall in Staffordshire, he said, I saw a rough diamond. He says, I saw massive potential that needed a really good polish. And he loved the idea of us being this piece of clay, I suppose, that he could mold a certain way, but it had to be, you know, we had some great riffs, we had some great melodies, we had some great vocal ideas. We wanted to utilize the power of a band like AC/DC, but use the kind of dynamics and melody of a band like Queen. And if we could kind of mold the two of them together, and I think Mutt was looking for a band that were willing and able to be that band, and that was us. You know, we were young, we were 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, and get the opportunity to work with Mutt Lange, you take it. You know, it's like not something that you don't look at that gift horse in the mouth. You sign that particular, you know, contract there and then sort of thing. You know, we went through some hellish times with Mutt, learning on the learning curve, you know, learning how he worked, adapting to this new way of working. But it was worth every, you know, blood, sweat and tear that we spilt, if you like, all of it, because we learned from him, and that's what we wanted to do. We furthered ourselves. He had a band that were prepared to go the extra mile where a lot of other bands that he'd worked with didn't, which is why maybe he only made one album with Foreigner. You know, I don't know, certain bands, their relationship with the producer only lasts for a while. Other artists like Queen worked with Roy Thomas Baker for 6 albums because they saw the same kind of thing, and so did he. So what we saw was what we hoped when we worked with him on High and Dry was the beginning of a long, fruitful relationship in the studio, and that's exactly what we got.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a friend of mine who's in an 80s rock band who just did a rock album with Mutt Lange in 2019. It hasn't been released yet, but you listen to the demos and then you listen to the after Mutt touched them, and you just sense the brilliance. I mean, it's just absolutely brilliant. And I'll finish on this because we have a couple more minutes. So two quick questions. Let me just get you back to Montreal. Great relationship with the city. You always come here. You've done tour rehearsals out of here back in the day. You've hubbed out of here back in the day. Talk to me about what is it about this place that just gets Def Leppard. Even in 1996, when it wasn't going so well in other markets, the Molson Center or the Bell Center still sold out. You recorded it. Qu'est-ce qui se passe à Montréal? What is it about Montreal?
Well, it's something that grows over a period of time. You know, every city that you go to first time round is, you know, will leave a mark on you. You know, you go, wow, I remember that gig we did in such and such a place. And sometimes you go, yeah, and I remember one we did in a different city where it wasn't so good. And until that improves, you go back there again and you maybe win them over or you have a better gig yourselves. It just seems that every time we turn up in Montreal, we win. You know, it's always been an incredible city for us. The first time we played there was in '83 on the Pyromania tour, and the reception everywhere in Canada was amazing. But then every time we went back, we always said it was the loudest crowd that we ever played in front of. And we said it publicly all over the world. We would take our lives in our hands when we'd be in Mexico, and they'd say, which is the loudest crowd? And they wanted us to say Mexico. And we'd have to say, I'm sorry, but it's Montreal. You know, but we got out of there alive. You know, and I don't think we've ever been to Montreal ever where it's not been good. I don't know why the people of Montreal took to us so much. You'd have to ask them. But I can tell you that's exactly why we took to the audiences in Montreal, because they've always been incredibly supportive, vocal, and we've always sold really well. We've never really had bad attendances in Montreal. There's just something about the relationship. I can't explain why it is so bonding, but it is. You know, we're tight. It's like we're glued together. Whenever we aren't whenever tour dates are put in front of us and we don't see Montreal on them, we freak out and go, why are we not playing Montreal? You know, and they'll say, well, we are, but it's going to be next year on a different part of the tour. Okay, good. As long as don't leave us out, because that's not smart. And it's somewhere that we always want to try and get a gig in, because it's just been an amazing experience for this last 30 odd years. Every time we get there, it's just super, super fun.
Oh, it is, and I haven't missed a show since Hysteria in Montreal. But and I'll finish with this: the stadium tour, of course, Motley Crue, Poison, and Joan Jett, mostly American. In fact, entirely American for now. Will the tour expand to other markets, including Canada, including Montreal? And just talk to me about the package in general, because, my God, I saw you with Def Leppard and Cheap Trick in Boston, and you're playing stadiums where most of your peers are having a hard time filling up bowling alleys, and you're playing stadiums. I mean, holy mackerel, right?
Yeah, it's sometimes you pinch yourself. You know, out on our own, we can do stadiums in certain areas of America. We can do arenas, sheds all over North America, including Canada, and not really be important who the other act is, if you like. But with this one, we loved what we did with Journey. It was only 10 stadiums and about 50 arenas, but it was a great way to go out on the road. You know, we've always had great bands tour with us. Back in the day, we've had Tesla, Queensryche, LA Guns, Europe, Joan Jett, Billy Idol, Heart, Cheap Trick. I mean, just incredible bands. And that's never going to change, because we've always believed in it should be from the second that the house lights go down for the first time, that the fans are in for a fun ride. When the idea of when we spoke with the guys after the movie came out, The Dirt, and their representatives were talking to ours and saying, what do you think? And we were like going, I think this could be the biggest thing since the 80s, if you like, and then the Live Nation people said, well, let's make it into like a kind of a traveling circus festival on the road, if you like, not just a gig. Make it an event. And I see the word event and my eyes bug out and my ears pop up because I'm like, okay, you got my attention now. I want everything we do to be an event. So to be able to bring out, this fantastic lineup of Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, Poison, Motley Crue and Def Leppard, to these, it started out as 22, it's now moving close to 30 stadiums. Of course, it's expanding throughout the US. It's probably going to expand further than that into next year. So I don't have any, concrete details for you, but use your imagination. I mean, something this successful, we'd like to keep it going for as long as we can.
As you should. And with that, I know we ran out of time. So just thank you so much. And for all the music over the years, just thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure being a fan of the bands, just always delivering, always putting out quality material, never disappointing. And for that, merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Mitch, thank you. And thank you for indulging me in my little side project, which is only a small little aspect of my life, but it's such a fun one. It's nice to be able to share it with whoever's interested, and I appreciate the opportunity of talking about that as well.
Yeah, and I have to say, if folks haven't picked it up, get yourself the Japanese version. There's a bonus track on there. It is well worth the import cost, and just pick it up. Thank you, sir. Merci.
Anytime, buddy. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye now.
Au revoir.
Ever wonder what Vince Neil would sound like if he was a black belt in Taekwondo? What about what his favorite McDonald's menu item is? Just hold the pickles. This is Rock Talk with Mitch LaFon.